In a village nestled amidst rolling hills and snow-laden fields lived a young girl named Wren. Unlike the rest of the villagers, who seemed content with their lives, Wren harbored a deep sense of dissatisfaction. She felt a longing for something more, a yearning for adventure that the mundane rhythm of village life couldn't quench. One particularly frosty evening, as the wind howled and the snow swirled outside, Wren found herself sitting by the hearth in her home. Her family, unaware of the turmoil in her heart, went about their evening chores, their voices echoing the tales of winter's bite and the need for extra logs on the hearth. Yet Wren's mind was elsewhere, her gaze fixed on the dancing flames, her thoughts taking flight. Suddenly, as if drawn by an invisible force, Wren stepped out into the raging blizzard. Her family's shouts of surprise and dismay lost in the wind's mournful song. The woman asked softly, her eyes filled with concern. "My name is Wren," the girl whispered, her voice hoarse from the cold. And as she spoke, the woman noticed the determination in the girl's eyes, the spirit of adventure that shone through the weariness. With a shaky hand, she knocked, and when the door opened, she collapsed. And as if understanding the unspoken desires in the girl's heart, the woman smiled. At the threshold, overcome by the warmth and the sight of a cozy interior, filled with the aroma of something delicious and the crackle of a roaring fire. And with that, the woman led Wren to a chair near the fire, offering her warm clothes and hot soup. As the girl sipped the soup, her body slowly warming, she felt a sense of gratitude mixed with anticipation for whatever adventure lay ahead. So go on, dear listener, and let your imagination soar. She walked into the storm, each step taking her further away from the village, deeper into the heart of the wild winter. And as the night deepened and the blizzard raged outside, the woman began to tell Wren stories of faraway lands, of daring quests and mythical creatures, each word weaving a tapestry of magic and wonder. The girl, refreshed and invigorated, thanked the woman for her hospitality and for the tales that had sparked the flame of adventure within her. The wind may have been cold, but within her burned a fire that promised to light the path ahead, kneading dough on a nearby table. The woman's touch was gentle, her voice soothing as she helped Wren out of her frozen cloak. As the night wore on, the wind's icy fingers clawed at Wren's skin, and the snow piled up around her, threatening to engulf her entirely. The woman watched her go, a knowing smile on her lips, for she had recognized the spark of greatness within the young girl. A greatness that a little magic and a lot of courage could bring to life. But through the pain and the cold, Wren pressed on, driven by an unknown force toward the unknown. The woman's stories had ignited a fire within her, and she knew that her adventure was just beginning. And then she saw it, a flickering light in the distance, faint yet inviting, like a beacon in the sea of white. Gathering the last of her strength, Wren stumbled toward the light, hope warming her more than any cloak could. When she finally reached it, she found a small cottage, its windows glowing with a soft, inviting glow. A woman inside the cottage, her face etched with years of wisdom and kindness, took notice of the girl. "But who are you, child?" "I'm here because I'm looking for an adventure," Wren said, her gaze fixed on the fire once more. "So an adventure you shall have," she said, her voice echoing with a hint of magic. For the first time in her life, Wren felt seen, understood. And so, the night passed, and with the first rays of sunlight peeking through the frosted window panes, the woman prepared to send Wren on her way. With a final wave, Wren stepped out into the crisp morning air, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Men, stepping into the vast expanse of the snow-covered fields, felt a surge of determination. And so Wren, the girl who once felt lost and alone, set off on her journey, carrying with her the warmth of the stranger's kindness and the magic of the stories that had captured her heart. Our story ends here, but yours is just beginning. What will you do next? What adventures await you? The world is yours to explore. This is an original story. All my life I've heard this phrase, the days are long and the nights are short, meaning that summertime, but here it's the opposite. Here in Wybrook Village, the days were short and the light felt thinner, as if the sun itself were tired. Each morning the villagers rose with the sound of crows. Their cries were sharp against the pale sky, as though even the birds were colder than they liked. Now, even the fire in the great hall seemed to shrink away from them. The water hissed and steamed like a dragon's breath, but it cooled again almost instantly. By noon, it would freeze over once more. The prior had seen too many cracked quills this season, too many ruined pages. Just garlic, onion, and water thickened with barley. She whispered a blessing over it, a charm she'd learned as a girl. Something about keeping the frost from the lungs. She didn't remember all the words anymore, but the sound of them was enough. She sat by the fire, sipping slowly, watching the steam rise in slow spirals. Lucerna, her cat, slept curled on the edge of the hearth. Same name, perhaps, as the one from another tale? Cats, after all, carry many names through many stories. Heat was not indulgence, it was survival. And yet, Osric did not complain. He saw beauty in the struggle. Every letter he wrote felt more meaningful because of the difficulty. To copy a single page in a freezing scriptorium was to declare that wisdom mattered, even when breath turned to frost. His hands had cracked along the knuckles. Each blackened fingernail was a badge of the season. His son brought him boiled linseed oil to rub into his skin, a trick passed down from his grandfather. Not a cure, but a kindness. The tapestries were woven with scenes of saints, castles, lions, and vines curling endlessly along the border. But no one looked at the pictures. They simply leaned closer, hands wrapped in cloth, grateful for the layer of softness between themselves and the stones that remembered frost. Ellsworth walked carefully to the well. Her wooden bucket creaked from last year's repairs. The rope was stiff with frost. Ellsworth pressed a wool scrap against the gap. It held. Night fell early again. It always did. And with it came the sounds of settling. Cracking wood, faint moans of ice on the roof, the soft thud of snow from the eaves. The sky turned deep indigo, and then black, but not empty. The stars. Oh, the stars in winter burned. Clearer, sharper, closer. Even the poorest soul had the right to look up and wonder. And so they did. Each person in Wybrook, each in their bed or hearthside blanket, closed their eyes with the cold still in their hair and let the long sleep take them, not quickly, but steadily, like a fire settling into embers. They dreamed of spring, not with longing, but with quiet trust, the same way one dreams of the next breath. Her hands stuck briefly to the cold wood before she remembered to breathe warm air on them. Their small fingers weren't meant for the cold, and mittens were a rare luxury. Instead, they sat near the hearth, carving small toys from scraps of wood, or weaving wool from the distaff under the careful eye of a sister or aunt. Stories helped. Stories of winter spirits that curled inside icicles, or of ancient heroes who slept beneath the snow, waiting for spring to awaken them. It's not frightening tales, but quiet ones. Ones told in low voices with flickering firelight casting shadows on the wall. Sometimes those shadows seemed to move. Not in fear, just in wonder. She let the bucket drop. There was no splash, just a dull, hollow sound. The water had frozen solid overnight. She didn't curse, didn't panic, just looked toward the woods. She knew the stream ran deeper there, beneath the old ash trees. But she also knew the wolves ran there too. That was the winter's constant bargain. Risk something to gain something. Children stayed inside on most days. In the manor house, the steward finally hung thick woolen tapestries over the stone walls. He'd delayed it too long this year. The walls had absorbed too much cold. The smithy toller poured a bucket of hot water over the iron anvil to crack off the ice. In the monastery, Brother Osric was given special permission to keep his inkpots inside his habit near his chest. Back in Ellsworth's cottage, she used the last of her garlic to make a broth. The door creaked in its frame, not from someone entering, but from the wind pressing in, looking for weakness. The wind howled that night, not like an animal, but like a warning. It curled down chimneys, shook the shutters, lifted thatch and threatened roofs. It was a north wind, known to the villagers as the white breath. It came only in the hardest part of winter, when even the hearths began to falter. In Ellsworth's cottage, the fire had sunk low. No more dry wood remained. Just a few twigs and a bit of straw saved for kindling. Their howls came closer now, not out of menace, but need. The snow was deep. The deer had vanished. Even the rabbits stayed beneath the frozen briar. We have our habits, our cats, our routines, are routines that give us the illusion of company. But real loneliness, well, that's something else. The wind snatched at her shawl, tugged at the hair unbound from its braid. But she held fast, peering out into the storm. On the battlements above her, a dark shape shifted again. To find this story, and many more like it, visit our website. Or better yet, pick up a copy of our anthology, which features the best fantasy and science fiction from the greatest authors in the world today. Each book is beautifully designed and bound with a special collectible cover. Plus, buying our books helps support independent bookstores, so do yourself a favor and grab a copy today. The wind tore at it, almost pulling it away. But a hand, gloved and grim, clutched the stone. Another came to help. The figure hauled itself over the parapet and dropped to the ground below. Rain lashed down, wind buffeted the intruder, but there was no mistaking that stride. That tilt of the head, that wolf skin cloak. Her brother, no? Could it be impossible? She thought him dead, slain in battle, lost to the wars. She wanted to scream, to laugh, to reach out, but found only silence. The figure raised his face to the storm. His jaw was set, his eyes narrowed against the lashing rain. For a moment, their gazes met across the courtyard. Time seemed to stop. Winter had been kind to him, though. His hair was a darker shade of red, frosted with white. She saw the grief etched around his eyes, the exhaustion in his shoulders. He was older, wearier than she remembered. His skin, tanned and lined, looked strong against the chill. And the wolf skin, it gave him the air of a warrior. This was no child, no spoiled lordling. This was a man forged in hardship and loss. The look in his eyes told her everything. He had walked back from the war, come home to a hollow keep and an empty hearth, and he had been alone ever since. Toller the blacksmith stood at the edge of his cottage, watching the forest. She whispered, meaning that she was alone still. Then who am I? You are home, he said. Come. He turned then, striding back to the gate. Each step was firm, sure. His cloak billowed behind him like a second skin. Wait. She crossed the courtyard, moving as lightly as she could over the uneven stones. Her heart beat fast, hammering in her chest. Within the tower, Elara huddled deeper into her furs, her fingers tracing patterns on the rough stone floor. Just one flame, flickering in the draft, casting shifting shadows on the wall. But the light was enough to chase away the darkest night. All around her, silence. Sometimes she thought the walls were too thick, the corridors too long, and the quiet pressed against her ears, pressing like a shroud. She longed for the clatter of servants, the murmur of lords and ladies, the squeak of her father pacing. But it had been 8 years since the Keep of Stars had fallen silent. 8 years since the men had marched out to fight a king who cared not for banner or blood, only for a crown. 8 years since her mother had taken the veil, leaving Elara in the cold keep with nothing but memories and stone. Memories like the hearth fires, glowing embers in the vast emptiness. The heavy oak door creaked open, throwing a sliver of moonlight across the floor. Elara did not start. She had expected someone to return, some nightly ghost to break her solitude. But it was just the wind and rain and the long falling night. But he would not touch it tonight, not unless someone in the village needed it more. Still, a flicker of movement caught her eye. Outside, the lattice of her window had shifted. Someone, or something, was climbing. He had one last slab of salted pork hidden beneath the floorboards. Even the village looked different, less like homes, more like shapes left in flower. A gift from a traveler he'd once mended a cart for. The moon rose, a silver coin behind thin clouds. It lit the snow in a soft, ghostly glow. But inside each house, within every shuttered window, small scenes of endurance flickered. A child warming stones near the fire. A woman whispering old charms into a cup of broth. A man sewing up a boot with trembling hands because spring would come, the road would matter again. And in her sleep, Elswith dreamed. She dreamed of a fire that never faded, of a village where snow fell warm. Of fields where winter turned not to hunger, but to hush. In her dream, she saw something small, and golden, and glowing. A candle, just one, alone, but not afraid. Its flame, steady. She laid them gently over the embers, blew softly, and watched a thin flame take hold, but she knew it would not last the night. She wrapped herself in every layer she owned, shawls, skirts, a woolen hood once meant for riding, then pulled the straw mattress close to the hearth and lay down beside Lucerna, who purred not from comfort, but from habit. There was no warmth left, only closeness. In the manor, the steward lit a beeswax candle. Unlike the tallow ones used by peasants, beeswax burned cleaner, longer, and smelled faintly of honey. They sat shoulder to shoulder, not for discipline, but for body heat. The scriptorium's high windows let in only pale winter light, but a single oil lamp burned in the center, casting dancing shadows over the vellum. Their fingers worked slowly, deliberately. Some pages curled at the edges from the chill. To be a scribe in winter was to know that beauty often comes through discomfort. Every curve of the letter G was a prayer. Every gold leaf pressed to the page was a triumph over frozen ink. Osric smiled faintly as he finished his line. It lux perpetua lucidies, and let perpetual light shine upon them. He leaned closer, closed his eyes, and dreamed of orchards. He used it sparingly, but tonight he needed it. God said he sat by it, not reading, not writing, just watching the light flicker on the wall. That single flame was like a tether to the warmer seasons. He remembered summers long past. The marketplace in full bloom, pears so ripe they stained the cloth, the sound of rain that brought life, not cold. The candle whispered in soft pops, and a thin stream of light wavered, but stayed. In the monastery, Brother Osric worked beside two others to copy the Psalms. In the woods beyond Wybrook, the wolves grew restless. For the people of this world, it is hard to understand what it is to be truly alone. The wind screamed that night, clawing at any chink it could find, rattling the panes. She moved then, quickly crossing the room to the shutter. With shaking hands, she slid it aside. When he finally spoke, his voice was hoarse. "Ilara," he said, surprised. "I thought you were gone." In the end, all it took was a single candle. Winter can be harsh, unforgiving, but sometimes it can also be beautiful, and all it takes is a single candle, just one small flame. It began with a sound, so faint most wouldn't have noticed. Not the call of a bird, nor the crack of ice, but the drip of water. One drop, then another, sliding from the edge of a cottage roof, like the first notes of a forgotten song. Elswith heard it in the early morning as she stirred from sleep. He simply stood still and let the warmth, what little there was, reach his cheeks. This time it was from fire. She'd found a scrap of pitch near the woodpile and coaxed the embers back to life. Not allowed. That would be premature, unwise even. Through the cracked skin and frozen wells, the sour ale and silent porridge. And now the light was changing. Even the snow noticed. Everyone knew winter had its tricks. Thaw could be followed by deeper cold. A sunny day could lead to another storm. But still, there was something in the air. Something like hope, wrapped in steam, held in wool, tucked between prayers. Outside, the snow was softening, collapsing gently under its own weight. Not melting fast, just sinking into itself like a tired child in bed. She opened the door and stepped outside. Her boots left shallow impressions in the snow. The earth was still frozen below, but not rock hard, more like sleeping skin. She looked up. The clouds parted slowly, and for the first time in many days, the sun peeked through. Only for a moment, but it was golden and real. And just like that, the village began to move again. The weaver opened her shutters to air out the must of wool. The children came outside in pairs, stamping the softened snow into patterns and paths. Someone even laughed, only a little. But it was more than silence. The stone walls behind him were still cold, but they didn't feel cruel anymore. The wind had calmed, and in its place came birdsong. Just one note, somewhere in the hedges. But it was enough. Her fire had died completely in the night, and her limbs were stiff beneath the patchwork blankets. But that sound, that tiny, rhythmic dripping, it made her open her eyes. She pushed the wool away slowly, wincing at the cold, but curious. At the window, the corners of the frost had begun to curl, like lace melting into clear glass. She placed her palm there, still too cold to touch long, but she saw it. The icicles along the edge of the eaves were crying. Down in the valley, A soft fog rose over the fields. Not snow, not frost, but breath, the land exhaling after long silence. Crows called less urgently now. Sky still wore its winter gray, but the air beneath it had softened. Toller stepped outside with his son beside him. They both squinted upward, the sun still hiding, but the wind had lost its bite. In the pen nearby, a pig snorted softly, alive. Thin, but alive. Toller knelt and whispered a short thanks to no one in particular. Not a prayer, not a song, just the kind of gratitude that takes the shape of breath. In the monastery, Brother Osric stood outside the chapel with both hands raised toward the sky. He didn't say anything, didn't sing or recite. Elswith poured water into her old kettle and watched the steam rise again. Still, no one spoke of spring yet, and so they waited, not with dread, but with patience, because they had made it this far, through the darkest nights. When spring finally came, it didn't arrive all at once. Spring never does. It came slowly, in moments small enough to miss if you weren't watching closely. It came in the scent of wet soil, deep, rich, earthy. It came in the chirp of a blackbird at dawn, testing its voice after long quiet. The snow melted into rivulets, and those rivulets became streams, and those streams fed the roots that had waited so patiently below. She looked at her hands, still rough, but alive. You too have passed through the frost, and warmth is yours now. Good night, dear dreamer. Sleep deeply. Winter is behind us. She looked at the tree, its branches no longer bare, and she smiled. The brutal winter had passed, and still she remained. A little quieter, a little slower, but full of stories that had survived the cold. And in that silence, in that simple breath of spring, we end this story. Fields were planted again. Goats gave milk again. And the village began to sing again. Not with voices, but with motion. Clothes on lines, footsteps on soft paths, the creak of carts returning to market, and above it all, the sun finally stayed longer each day, warmer each hour. The same sun they had once prayed to in silence now touched their faces with a golden hand. It came in fingers that no longer cracked from cold, and in boots that finally dried by the hearth instead of steaming endlessly. And in Elswith's garden, it came as a whisper, soft green tips pushing through the brown. The villagers of Wybrook emerged like roots from frozen ground. At first, they moved cautiously, carrying out bundles of herbs saved from last year, planting onions and leeks in rows barely thawed. They spoke more often now, not just of work, but of warmth. Children played again without smoke trailing from their breath, and wool cloaks hung from pegs rather than shoulders. Toller opened the forge fully. The bellows roared. His hammer rang out like a bell, bright, clean, alive. He made a new pothook for Elswith, without her asking. When he delivered it, she offered him a slice of fresh bread with wild garlic mashed into the dough. They said nothing, just sat for a while, chewing slowly as steam curled from their cups. It was enough. In the monastery, Brother Osric finished his manuscript. It was a copy of the Psalms begun during the first snow, finished in the first bloom. He lit a candle beside it, beeswax, bright and slow burning. He whispered a final line beneath his breath. He shall come down like rain upon the mown grass. Closed the book. The monks would bind it. Maybe no one would read it for years, but the work was done. It was beautiful. That was enough. One by one, the signs of life returned. As for Elswith, she sat beneath the ash tree near her home, Lucerna curled in her lap, the garden sprouting beside her. Let your eyes grow soft, let your limbs grow heavy, and let the candle in your mind burn low, but steady.